In this tutorial, I'm working on another 6 by 6 inch piece of Arches 300-pound watercolor paper. And I'm going to be doing another Marsh with a sunset, working with some bolder colors to give some contrast. I start out wetting my paper both sides, spritzing it. That keeps the paper flat. I'm working with hot press paper, which is smooth paper, which gives me less texture but freer movement on the paper. I'm starting out with some cad orange and a little cad yellow light for my sky, and just beginning to do a light wash on the background to give that sunset. I'll be manipulating that quite a bit throughout as I notice it's changing, adding a touch of alizarin crimson you see there, and I mixed it with a little bit of the cad orange. As I've said in my past videos, the watercolor paints move, they lighten when they dry, so I just keep watching it, and I always like to work from the background forward, but I do manipulate and play with the foreground a little bit as the background dries slightly. And you'll notice with the paper, when the shine on the paper starts to go away and it dries out, you have a little more control and it's not so wet on wet. Coming in here with just cobalt blue and water to just give my layout of my foreground. Again, you'll see I'll go in and just keep playing with that sky. As it moves, I keep trying to take a little control of it. Always seem to be pulling particles out of there. I'm going in with a phthalo green yellow and a little bit of the muddy grays on my palette to make that green. I'm just again giving the basic outline of what my composition is going to be, which is little mountains in the background with some trees. Again, as always, keep in mind the shadow, where the light's coming from. This is a sunset, but I still have a shadow. So the sun is setting obviously behind the mountain and behind the trees. So just that's my constant thought of, what's happening with the light source. I'm coming in with yellow ochre and a little bit of that cream opaque I use so often, giving my basic outline again. And, always keeping an eye on my sky, because that I want to finish pretty soon here for the most part. So as I'm working the foreground, I'll just keep an eye on that sky. See, I just keep going back in. And as it dries and it's not as dramatic as I might have wanted it to be or thought it might turn out to be, I go back in and give it a little more color, working a bit drier. And as you see, the paper in the foreground is still slightly wet. As I told you, the paper was wet on both sides. So it is a really nice saturated paper, but it's not so wet that it's not controllable. I come in a little drier with the yellow ochre. You notice my strokes are going vertical as well as horizontal. I'm starting to shape the grasses in that marsh area. Coming in with some Payne's gray and a little opaque white just to give that smoky mountain in the distance. And trying to make it so that the mountain sets on top of the sky. So I really want to finish that sky as close as I can. I'm trying to bring some of the sky colors down into the foreground so that the painting is one painting and not two separate paintings. In other words, I don't want the sky to be one focus and the foreground to be another. So I try to always somehow incorporate the palette moving through the painting, even sometimes if it's just an ever so subtle touch. That's all it needs sometimes. I'm going in with my yellow and my orange again, trying to finish up that darn sky that seems to be a nuisance to me right now because I'm I'm constantly having to go back in. But that's okay. That's what watercolor is all about. You know, we have all seen those skies where they're just so brilliant, and you know, trying to capture them sometimes on paint in a watercolor is a challenge, just because you know we know how brilliant they are, and sometimes, for me anyway, when I go in to do a painting, I don't want it to look artificial. But yet the sky sometimes just comes out that way. I jumped ahead a little bit just because this video was so long. And I did cut out where I had gone in the background and done some of the trees. Now I'm going in with a little bit of dry brush, making sure I don't have a lot of water on my paint, enough to manipulate, but not a ton. You'll notice I constantly am touching that paper towel around my painting. And my strokes are vertical here. As I get drier and drier and closer to the completion of this piece, I want to make sure that my strokes go in the way nature is, and those grasses obviously are standing up. And you'll see I'm trying to bring in some of the reflection from the sky, the beautiful sunset, into the water. That helps to ground the piece. And you know that looks pretty bright right there for a sunset reflection, but again, it's going to fade. So I go in probably a little darker than what I think it will finish up as. And the other thing, I can always try to lift a little bit. Always moving my paints around. Sometimes I just go into the painting with a clean brush and just move the paint around. As you see, I brought in my yellow ochre and the orange together, and I think I have also touched the burnt sienna to give a little bit of a brown, darker brown. And my piece is getting darker and darker with the strokes, but not covering up every thing I've laid down, because I don't want to do that. I want to show some of what I've done in the beginning. And I'll come in with some darker shadows. I'm using the cobalt and a touch of the ultramarine blue to start showing some shadow marks where the grass and the water meet. You know, it's not the sunset that's we're not in darkness yet, so I'm making this, you know, it's just before dark. So I do have some water reflection there. Trying to keep in mind my strokes on this, where the water would lay and the shadows would lay in the water naturally. You know, one thing I try to do when I'm out and about walking around in nature is paying attention to things like this. I pay attention to the water, the grasses, just as a mental note, because a lot of paintings I do from memory. After painting for so long, I'm freer with how I paint and don't always need a photograph or to be sitting outside doing a plein air painting, which is painting on site, as you probably already know. So again, I'm going in with my grasses with that tan opaque and just giving some ever so subtle touches. Look at me going back into that sky. Final touches, I hope, right? So I went in with that opaque, and I seem to like that now. That brings out the mountain a little bit, softens the skies. Texture that I really wanted, a smoother sky. And I am going to want a little setting sun. So I'm going to leave a mark at some point of of the sun showing ever so slightly. Going in with that opaque, and that's just giving some nice highlights to the grasses, and that will change. Again, it won't be as pronounced as it appears right there. Obviously, I'm feathering it out, but it'll dry softer, so it won't be as prominent as it is right there. Going back in with my blues, the cobalt, and that ultramarine, and a little bit of the opaque white. And as I always talk about my messy palette, I love my messy palette because I can always pick up that muddy color or that toned down color that was from a previous painting that I can use. I'm also a New Englander, and I hate to waste anything, especially when it comes into the arts. It can be useful. So look at that shadow, just enough of a touch to really bring out the reflection. And I don't do like one straight line. I kind of do a point here and point there. So again, it doesn't look too artificial. I mean, this is really an impression of my view of this. It's not realism. It's not photorealism. It's a impression of this scene in my head. And this is the artistic license I have, which is I can do whatever I want, and this is what I chose to do, and it's just for pleasure here, and it's just a tutorial to hopefully help other people along their way on their journey of trying to paint. And I hope it does encourage you to pick up a paintbrush. What have you got to lose except the joy of painting and the challenge? And there's nothing better than a little challenge, especially as we get older. I'm finding working outside my comfort zone is definitely a good thing. And I hope the same is true for you. So again, just coming in kind of dry brush there. Taking some time to think about what's happening here. And I'm just doing the final touches as I finish up this piece. You notice I put the sky, I did put the moon in there. This is straight ultramarine blue. Again, it might look a little bit harsh to you, but it's going to soften, and I'm going to feather that a little bit. But it's a nice little extra drama. I'm liking that and hoping it doesn't dry too much. And at the end, I'll go in with a little tiny touch of pencil into the grass strokes. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with this piece. It was fun to do, and I hope you enjoyed it. And just keep in mind, play with color, challenge yourself with working in colors that you're not normally comfortable with and seeing how they work. I don't often do sunsets or sunrises, and I thought what a great thing to try today to show you how I do it, right or wrong. It's how I do it, and hopefully it helps you when you want to attempt a painting. It's always nice to see other people and how they render certain things. And remember, we've all got our artistic license to try whatever we want with our paintings. Nothing ventured, nothing gained with these. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Go out and pick up a paintbrush and some paper and get to painting. I hope I see you in the next painting I do. I look forward to it. I'm trying to do 2 paintings a week, and I'm going to start doing them 2 to 3 anyway. But if you like what I'm doing, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next painting. Thank you for following me, and hopefully you'll subscribe, and I'll see you around. Have a great day.